Let's put it this way. If you see them as being different, if you see these two ideas as being different and your job is being an auditor, you suck at your job. You are doing it for all the wrong reasons. You don't get why you're doing what you're doing. You are clueless and you should stop. You should hang up your camera, shut your mouth, turn off your social media, and get the hell out of everybody's face, because you are just another clown who is only selectively outraged at a system taking advantage of people and violating people, violating their protected rights as well as violating those people. Really, you can't violate rights, you can only violate people.
We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Welcome to the show. It's Toward Anarchy. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Michael Storm. It's Saturday night. It's prime time. We're worldwide on the Republic Broadcasting Network. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and X and just about everywhere else at Toward Anarchy. Wherever you do find me, please take just a moment to click that like button, smash that like button, make love to that like button. Whatever it is that you and that like button are doing, as long as it's voluntary and consensual, please click it and let me know that you're out there. You can follow along at towardanarchy.com. As always, quick shout out to the folks on Rumble. Just one of my favorite places to be these days. Just hi, Rumble people, thank you. I do 10 times the hits on Rumble that I do on YouTube on any given post that I make, and considering 10 times the hits could mean the 11 hits or 12 hits, depending on what it is. So some things get traction and some things do not at all. I have never figured out the magic formula when you're not already famous and you're not already getting the hits, what it is to get them and sustain them, because it's certainly not being reasonable and understandable and making true individual arguments for the things that I make. It's kind of funny because I did do a thing this week where I put out a post to say to people, hey, wouldn't it be great if you'd just throw me a like, I don't do things like that very often, but I have thousands of connections all over the world to my personal accounts, but I do not have those same connections to the Toward Anarchy social media page, as opposed to my personal social media stuff, and so trying to just get a few likes over there and just every once in a while throw out a thing, it's better than me tagging people or whatever it is, inviting them to something where they have this stupid list of things. They have no idea what it is. They don't know if you are the person that runs that page, or if it's somebody else, or if and usually that stuff is just it's just somebody selecting from a random list, clicking a checkbox, and it selects a number of people and sends it out to their friends. And rather than doing that, I just simply put out a post asking, hey, wouldn't it be great? I've been doing this a long time. I've proven myself to be one of the most consistent and honest proponents and practitioners of the BS I espouse. So I think I've earned it, that like. I've done it. I've put in the time and the effort. and trying to get them while they're at it to like the Amazing Fantasies social media page too as well, because then there again, like 10 times on my personal page as opposed to on that so much more important. I wouldn't care if anybody didn't follow me. I had the social media pages to reach out to people, but reach out to people that wanted the message, and not everybody on my page wants the message. That's pretty clear. So I wouldn't have to explain myself so many times. That's funny. Somebody just liked that post I was just talking about. That's great. TowardAnarchy.com to follow along. When you get there, you'll see it's 2515. That's the episode number. Ashe Woodward will be my guest at the top of the hour, and I am going to ask, amongst other questions today, and go over some of the things in the news, because we have not done a great deal of that here lately. Not that there's anything interesting to necessarily go over, but one of the questions that I want to ask and answer today, obviously, I don't ask questions in a vacuum without trying to answer them. I try not to leave too many things hanging open-ended like that. It amazes me. I always worry that I have left so many things open-ended as I'm talking in such a free-form atmosphere as it is here. I have little or no notes in front of me. I have a handful of note cards that I keep that remind me to plug the network and to plug the show in the middle of the week, the live show that Dr. Dean Lloyd and I do. That'll happen. And then I have my notes for the comic book that I'll tell you about today, because I don't always do that live, as it were, during the show. So I ask these questions to get the answers to them, and I want to know because other people wanted to know. I actually already know the answer. I wanted to address directly, because this might be another one of those things like tariffs, where for so long I did here recently. I had not addressed it in anything more than just sort of a passing mention of what it is. Here's some links or something like that. But I went through it a little bit more in depth here recently to make myself feel like I've done a little bit better service than sometimes I might feel like when I'm just talking about these things, when I'm talking about them amongst every other thing. And this is one of those things that I have talked about, and that's auditors. These are the First and Second Amendment auditors, as well as these sort of not necessarily sovereign citizens, because I know plenty of people who believe they are travelers, not drivers, that are not what you would call sovereign citizens. That there's so much. You want to talk about a problem with language in using the word anarchy. You call yourself a sovereign citizen in front of the wrong person and see how that goes. At least when you use the word anarchist, the first response is usually, "Oh, you're full of crap," or they're genuinely interested in you're an anarchist. Well, what does that mean? What exactly is that supposed to be about? And then you have an open door to go in and talk to somebody. But I want to know, because other people again wanted to know, and I wanted to address it directly. What do they have in common? What do the traveler and driver crowd have in common with the auditors? And it should be fairly obvious what they have in common, but it wasn't to some people, and we'll do that. And then, of course, like I said, in the second hour, top of the hour here, we'll bring Ashe Woodward in here. She's the host of the Spooky Scholars podcast, and we will talk about pop culture and horror, and we'll talk about the system. She's Canadian, so some of the politics comes up. We talk a little bit about Trump and tariffs and things like that. So all of that's in there. But I invited Ashe on the show. She's someone else that I ran into on the Podmatch system, and had such a great conversation with her. She had me on her show here a couple of weeks ago. The link's up there. And it was just a great conversation, because I am trying this thing where I do my thing, and I like my thing, and I get to do my thing before I do the other things that are so much less important, like spitting into the wind. It doesn't, because it comes right back at you. That was the point of that, and it just doesn't always work. It's not the greatest response that you'll get from one of your own actions, is kind of what I'm getting at. Because there's so much there's so much that I cover, and there's so much that I can talk about and would talk about, and some of it has certain levels of importance, and some of it is just not important at all. And frankly, I think the comic books are a lot more important than a bunch of this nonsense, a good majority of this nonsense that we talk about in the news and in our daily lives. I think it's much more important that people read well and be entertained and be happy in their lives and happy with simple things. That's not to say that they shouldn't or couldn't or wouldn't aspire to greater, better things. I don't know what those things might be, so why would I exclude them? I wouldn't. That would be the point. And we would, we go forward. We just continue to move forward, doing the things that we like, that are good for us, because putting too much energy into this system thing, a lot more powerful, smarter, faster, better looking, better, more well-read people, better than me, better than you, better than the best, have done it, and this is what we got. So, why spend too much time worrying about how important these things are when you should spend... it's important to know what they're doing so that you know how you can shield yourself from them. That's about the extent of what you need to know what's going on in the world. And I'm tired of conservatives cheering larger government while they claim they're making it smaller, when they're talking about mandates and passing mandates and saying that companies can't use certain products or certain services or certain colors of dye in food. And we're still having this stupid conversation with you conservatives. I know you're listening. I know you're listening. There's no question about that, because I get the responses and I get the feedback on it, especially when I call you guys out on your BS. This claim that conservatives are better stewards of our democracy, of our republic, of this game that we're all playing here is farcical. It's ridiculous, and it's made completely bare in every sense of the word when you watch the Cheeto man, the orange guy, Donald Trump, the president, Mr. President, whatever you call this clown up there in the big top circus there. This show that they're putting on, I don't know how anybody's falling for it, and I cannot excuse the so-called conservatives for accepting the things that a socialist does. If he were doing any of these things with Democrat in front of his name, you clowns would be up in arms at the circus. You wouldn't just be going. You wouldn't be saying, "Hey, everybody needs to join the three-ring circus." You'd be like, "This is a three-ring circus, and we need to stop." Do me a favor, support the network. republicbroadcasting.org is the place to go, of course. And when you get there, you can click that little button over on the left-hand side. It's just this little orange button right over here. It says donate. If you click that bad boy, a couple clicks away from there, maybe a number on the number keys, and you've entered in an amount, and it's donated. It's monthly. It's a one-time donation. It's yearly. It's whatever you need to do. It's up to you, whatever you can do. Click that button, support the network. If you don't like the buttons, you don't like the internet thing, call 800-724-2719. Hit up extension 3. Talk to somebody there. Talk to Mike or Sam or somebody there. Somebody will help you out at the network, and they will tell you where to go, what to do, in the good way. You could send a check or a money order if you're just amicable in that sense and you're just ready to write the check like so many of you have done for so many years. You're amazing. I don't ask for this for myself. I can do this without the network. I'm here with the network because I believe in the mission of the network in that general sense of reaching people and having the honest conversation and being what the liberals would love, a safe space for the conversation. They wouldn't find much love here, I don't think, necessarily, because some of them will. God, it's so... Oh, you people, you voters, man, you guys pretending playing this game. You're just crazy. 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. That's where RBN can be found. That's where you can mail a check. There's another way you can support the network. ShopRBN.com. That's the win-win. You support the advertisers. The advertisers continue to advertise on the network. I continue to make no friends on the left or right with 2 hours of conversation and news and information and just raising hell each week. Thanks to you. It's awesome. It really, truly is. And as I was mentioning earlier, I am doing another show during the week for the network. It's Dr. Lloyd and I. I'm just kind of the monkey, one of the two monkeys, just making sure that the buttons and everything moves smoothly and that Dr. Lloyd can just concentrate on answering questions, because that's what we're doing. The show is called Your Health in Mind. It's airing across Republic Broadcasting Network every Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, with yours truly hosting for facilitator and healer Dr. Dean Lloyd. And we are taking your calls live. We've been taking calls each week for the last few weeks, and it's been fantastic talking to people in Georgia and Florida and Louisiana and LA. It's just been fantastic talking to people all over and just answering some of those questions that they have about the healthcare industry or their own healthcare concerns. It's really been fun to do, something that Dr. Lloyd and I had been planning to do for a while and are glad to be finally able to do so. TowardAnarchy.com, 2515. That's the episode number. You'll see Ashe Woodward there. I have all the usual stuff. Give us that follow on Facebook or Instagram and X and anywhere else at Toward Anarchy. Click that like button, that follow button, that share button, all those buttons. Click them quickly. This week I am going to... I have a bunch for you. There's a couple of things in here under the anarchist audit that I definitely want to address, but I want to address the main question first about the auditors and the obvious answer to the question of whether or not they have anything in common with the traveler and not driver crowds. Because there clearly is some. There's no question in my mind that it is, and it should be obvious to anybody. So the auditors are there because they claim to be auditing our protected rights. They are going into places like post offices and otherwise being in public spaces, places where anybody can go, that there is no general restriction against people going there, or specific. There can be specific restrictions to keep people, but they're not going to those spaces. That's one of the points that they try to make when they're doing these audits. And so these people will go with their cameras and they'll go annoy people at the post office, but not really, because all they're doing is standing there. They're just filming, and they have a right to do so because it's been made very clear that we can record anything in public. Anything that can be seen, we can record. And that makes sense. Why wouldn't we? If it's in the open, why couldn't we record it? Because it can be seen. It can be seen by anybody who is out here in the open along with it. And so it makes no sense to suggest that you couldn't record permanently something that is viewed in public, even temporarily. Even if it's only for a short amount of time. That's how these people, they need to deal with these audits. And I wanted to get this question out of the way real quick so that we can go on with everything else, because I have a number of different things that these links, because I hadn't been doing anything for the last few weeks in terms, we've had some time off. We had the holiday weekend, and I had a couple of shows where I was doing single topics, and all of this has happened here over the last month or so, and so I'm a little bit disconnected. And so getting into the articles and stories that were out there to look at, it was just kind of blowing my mind, everything out, and just trying to take it all in and understand it all. So I want to make sure we get this overlap, because that's a question. Is there an overlap between the auditor community and the traveler community, the I'm not driving, I'm traveling community? And I don't want to say sovereign citizens or because that's how it's been put to me before, because they're not the same thing. They just aren't. Again, I've known, I don't know how many people, a lot of people over the years, over the last 20 years for sure, who are people who believe that we have the right to travel and that the government doesn't have any purview in suggesting that we can't travel or that we can't travel anywhere that we want that's open and public, the roads that we paid for isn't private property. But beyond that, that we should not be accosted out on the road. And so when these auditors are going into these places, they're going in with the same premise that they're not doing anything wrong, that they're just driving down the road. They're just walking into the public space. They're walking through the public space. They're standing around in the public space, doing things that are completely legal and are completely legal in every sense of the word in that open space. They're not bothering people. If people are bothered by it, that's their problem because it's public. You don't have any expectation of privacy when you are in public. And it just doesn't matter. You don't. It doesn't even make any sense that you could expect to have privacy or that you could expect that when you go out into public, your face isn't recorded. These cities and states have been doing it for decades. They've been building up an entire system of cameras. Even here in Topeka, Kansas, this little one-horse pissant town, they have a complete surveillance system where they can track stolen cars, people basically out of any neighborhood, anywhere into the city, onto the highways. They've exposed it before and talked about it, and people ask about the cameras. They don't give a damn. They don't care. And you know why? Because people are in public and they have no expectation of privacy, not even from criminal scumbags who call themselves authority. That's the fact of it. And so that's part of the reason that they have to let us do it, is because they want to be able to do it. That's one of the reasons that they have to let us carry guns, because they want to be able to carry guns. This is not the place, and this really isn't the time, to discuss the question of whether or not these people will do what's right, that they should do what's right at every time or every place, whether they're people or people in uniform. So when these auditors go in and they bother these people, the best case scenario is that they educate maybe one or two officers, maybe a handful of officers around, on the rights of people to photograph, say, in a post office or out on a public street, or even in a window. This is one of these things where there's a big glass open window and you walk by with a camera or you're around with a camera and you record, and somebody comes out, whether they're an actor for the state or a private citizen, comes out and suggests to you that you can't do that. Well, what are you talking about? You have this great big open window right here. Anybody can see in it at any time. If you want privacy, recorded or any other kind, you have to close your window. That's the way the world works in so-called public. And I get what the auditors are doing. But I have a problem with it, generally speaking, because it doesn't work, and I have a real problem with it. They're not changing anything. They're not changing a damn thing doing this auditing. All they're doing is getting paid, ultimately. And it will not change anything. They'll get a payday. Some of them won't. Some of them will get thrown in jail. Some of them will get to argue their rights in front of a judge. But none of this is going to, because first of all, they're exercising rights that we already know exist and we already know are protected. So what are you protecting? Nothing. You're taking a situation and making it more complicated than it ever needs to be, generally speaking, because there's no reason for anybody to be walking around with a camera recording in a post office. There just isn't. There's no point for it. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you have to do something. And so I'm not a big fan of the auditors. I think that what they do is almost worthless. But there's a crossover. And it's because the auditors, they're saying that they're not committing a crime and that the state has no claim over them, that these people, any of these people, whether they're state actors or whether they're private citizens, have no claim over somebody when they're in public not committing a crime. And so that's the same that's true of the travelers. It's literally the same thing. We're saying we're out in public, we're just passing through, we're driving through. Maybe they're driving fast. Maybe they're controlling the vehicle fast. The language, and that's what happens when you get manipulators controlling language and trying to suggest that driving and traveling are the same thing. But driving is an action. Travelers drive their vehicles, but the drivers are people who make money on the road. They drive things for a living. They drive people around, and there's nothing legal or moral that gives the state the right to hinder the ability to travel from one place to another. The only thought of this ever is that they were taxing the people who make money on the roads to help pay for the excessive use of the roads, because they're not using them to travel. They're using them to make money and to, at best, travel other people around, or goods or services or whatever. And that's the theory behind drivers versus people who drive vehicles that are travelers, who have the absolute right to travel anywhere they want that isn't on private property. And it should be unfettered as long as they're not committing any crime. And the suggestion that speeding or even drunken driving is a crime is a lie, because the crime is the wreck. The crime is the damage to somebody else's property. It doesn't, if they wreck their own vehicle into a ditch and don't damage anybody's property, who gives a damn? They're an idiot. Their car's damaged. Maybe they learned their lesson. Maybe they're dead. Who knows? It doesn't matter. It's their problem. It's nobody else's problem. A crime becomes a crime when you make your stupidity and your actions somebody else's problem. When you damage them, when you damage their property, that's the crime. So yes, the answer is yes. There is an overlap, and I don't care if you auditors don't like it. I don't think let's put it this way. If you see them as being different, if you see these two ideas as being different, and your job is being an auditor, you suck at your job. You are doing it for all the wrong reasons. You don't get why you're doing what you're doing. You are clueless, and you should stop. You should hang up your camera, shut your mouth, turn off your social media, and get the hell out of everybody's face, because you are just another clown who is only selectively outraged at a system taking advantage of people and violating people, violating their protected rights as well as violating those people. Really, you can't violate rights, you can only violate people. Yes, sorry, auditors. Yeah, you are making the same basic claim as the travelers, as the sovereign citizens as well. If we wanted to get into it, we could, but it should be real clear. It shouldn't take any genius to figure that out. It's pretty straightforward. It really, truly is. And I just had to make sure to get that out and to get that into the open space here, because I'm tired of it. I'm tired of fake ass, particularly conservatives, pretending that this fight is about certain rights or about certain laws or certain people. It's not. It's about all people. People, not citizens, not Americans, not white people, not men, not Rainbow Coalition. I don't know what the hell that is. It's not for this system. This thing that was created was never meant to be for just them, for that group over there. It wasn't meant to be, at least not based on the historical papers and the words of the people, that if you think that's what they meant with this, then I think you missed probably a few chapters of the books when we're talking about what it is these people thought was happening. Now, it being usurped and being changed into something different all this time later, that's really just another conversation. It's just another part of the systemic problem of government, the systemic problem of trying to codify things, codify protections, codify the rights, codify laws in general, when you can't agree on what is a violation of somebody or what is a right. You can't codify these things if you're going to have people questioning them every time that they think they have a right to something, and it's not protected, it's not written down, it's not codified, and they don't do the test. These people that want all these special privileges, they don't do the simple test of if it can't be a right if it imposes upon somebody else, or somebody else is forced to serve you or service you or help you or whatever it is, give you their money, let you on their property, whatever it is you imagine your right is, whether you have a right to health care. You don't have a right to health care. You have an unfettered right to seek health care wherever the hell you want. That's what you have. You do not have a right to health care, because a right to health care insists that you have a right to somebody's time, somebody's skills, the education that they paid for. Well, maybe they didn't pay for it. The government probably paid for it, which you probably paid for. Well, okay, all right. The point was moot. No. Back up there at towardanarchy.com. It's episode 2515. I shared a bunch of links up there, and we will get right into those. But and there's a quote and all these things. I'm going to read them all to you. But I really wanted to do something that I hadn't done in a while, because I've been doing so many of them each week. These comic books that I've been reading, I've been doing so many of them each week that there's more than one. However many I've been doing, there's more than one, and I only have time for the one in the show. And so I haven't been reading it into the show. It's been recorded already, and I'll just sort of say, oh, and I'll tell you about this comic book I read, and I'd splice it right there, and it might seem, depending on how well I pull it off, seem like it was seamless and that I had done it right then and there, like I am going to do right now. But I haven't been. I have been cutting them in like that. And that means that means a whole bunch of different things. But ultimately, it kind of means that almost all the people who have heard my reviews, my reactions to these comic books, have no idea that I have a 2-hour show each week that I've been doing for the Republic Broadcasting Network for 6 years now, and it's a well-received show. I have followers all around the world. Somebody's listening to the show all the time. It's not always about comic books. It's a lot more about comic books maybe today than it was yesterday, as it were, because I've made it a point to make it as such. But sometimes it is just about comic books and fun and pop culture and all these other things that I get to talk about in over a 2-hour span. I mean, my guest coming up, Ashe Woodward, here at the top of the hour, is this a horror expert. She's the spooky scholar, quite literally, and having a chance to talk with her like I did a couple of weeks ago about the history of comic books and about the relationship between horror and comic books and how it still goes on today. That's fantastic. I love that, because what people need to read, and people need to read what they enjoy, and better that they read something than nothing. These are all the simplest, easiest arguments, above and beyond the quality, the fun, the entertainment in there, and that's why I wanted to include a read on this one in the show this week, because this is a classic. This book that I read this week is one of these, what they call facsimiles. I know us old people know what facsimiles are. New people may not. They're supposedly exact copies of the originals, and in a lot of cases these are. They even make them in the oversized formats, not like the normal size that they are today. Well, the current size that they are today, I should say. There's nothing normal about it. The current size that they are today. And this one is no different than that. This is More Fun Comics is what it is. It's a DC Comics group publication, Superman Comics. We're talking 1941, November, September 1941 here. This particular issue is number 73. More Fun Comics is, of course, the home of Dr. Fate and the Spectre and many others. It's an anthology series, anthology books, like many books were back in this time period. There weren't very many. There may not be any titles that were like a single character that held its own title until Superman. What was that? A year before, right? 1940, or was it 39 when Superman got his own comic? Because obviously he started out in Action Comics. It might have been 39, so it hadn't been long, and there hadn't been many, if there had been any at all. Most of the books were still these anthology series, and I love these. I still get, even though I don't talk about DC and Marvel a lot, I concentrate more on the independent books in these reactions, these reviews. It's not that I don't read them and I don't collect them, because I do, and I collect mostly the anthology stuff. I have Action Comics and Detective Comics, of course, on the list, and then there's Brave and Bold and some others that come and go at different times, World's Finest, but that kind of does just focus on Superman and Batman together, but with other characters and things. It's more than just about a single character, and you don't have to try to get a single character to carry a title, because they couldn't back then, and they barely can do it these days. So that's why there are more anthology books today than there were, yesterday, like I was saying. More Fun Comics, DC Comics Group, number 73. It opens up with a Dr. Fate story, which is, of course, that makes sense. And with these facsimiles, one of the best things about them isn't just that you get these old stories, it's that you get everything else around it, and you get sort of the advertisements and the editorials and the commentary, and in a lot of these magazine type anthology series, they will there'll be stories. They don't even have traditional comic book images to go along with them, and there's at least one of those stories in this one, if I remember correctly. I made all my notes down on here. I read so much of this stuff in a week, I have to think about it sometimes. But this one I didn't have to think about a lot, because this is fantastic. This is history right here. This particular book, along with all those advertisements, like the Superman crypto ray gun, which is just a projector. It's a handheld projector that projects images on the walls, but it's made by Daisy, the gun people. Along with the ads and the things like that. There's also the language. They spoke so much differently than we do today, and there's something of a weird American formality, not like what you would expect, a British formality, right? But an American formality that we don't necessarily have these days, with so much slang in our language, and people coming from so many different places and such different vast experiences, even from one state to the next, or half of the state to the next. Have you ever compared to the people on the east side of Colorado, east side of the mountains, the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, to the west side of the Rocky Mountains? Ask anybody that lives there on either side, and they'll tell you one about the other. So either way, I'm safe on this one, because I'm not choosing a side, even though I'm from this side of it, and I'm not over there with those weirdos on the west side of the mountains. This book is the first appearance of Green Arrow and Speedy. That's what I guess the second story in here, and that's Oliver Green and Roy Harper, those characters that we know today. Maybe Speedy not as well known, obviously. Also the first appearance of the Aeroplane. Green Aeroplane, yeah, whatever. You got some of them are a stretch, folks. Great little story in there about a mysterious killer who's going around killing members of this history club. And the members of the history club are kind of funny, because they're all people with natural, sort of famous last names, like Lincoln or Hale, like Nathaniel Hale, that sort of thing. Caesar was another one of them. There's a number of them in this group. And they they have to solve that mystery, and they do. There's a third. This book is huge. This thing is huge. There's each one of these stories, by the way, except for the one written story, is like 8 pages long, 8 to 10 pages long. Each one of them, each of these. So there's the Dr. Fate story. There's the Green Arrow story. There's a third story that features the Radio Squad, and the Radio Squad is a regular feature in More Fun Comics. The fourth story is featuring Johnny Quick, and he's kind of a Flash-like character, super speedy kind of guy. There's a fifth story, which is a whodunit, which is there's no art in it. It's just a couple of pages, and it's just a quick little whodunit sort of mystery, maybe like an Encyclopedia Brown type mystery almost. Kind of simple, not too big. Obviously, if it's only a couple of pages of print, it can't be too big. There's a sixth story that features Clip Carson, and he's a dapper sort of detective type character. A seventh story that is about the Spectre, and you had to get him in there at some point, right? And then they wrap it up with, and this is why this is amazing. This book is just so amazing. The first appearance of Aquaman, and of course Aquaman he's the answer to a couple of things. It's 1941, so we're talking about the growing fear of Nazis and submarines, and then of course Timely Comics has their Submariner character already a couple of years before that, 1939. So More Fun Comics, an amazing read, fun stuff. It's on your shelves right now, your local comic shop shelves. If you can't get one, hit me up at amazingfantasies.com. I'll help you get one, or I'll find one somewhere out there for you, or a place to get one somewhere out there for you. I'll help you out. Otherwise, if you're ever in Topeka, Kansas, stop and visit us in the store sometime. And so back to the what I do for the rest of the 2 hours that I do each week. And at towardanarchy.com, I have all the things that I share every week. I have a meme up there that I have to tell you about, and a quote: "If 1,000 men were not to pay their tax bills this year, that would not be a violent and bloody measure, as it would be to pay them and enable the state to commit violence and shed innocent blood. This, in fact, is the definition of a peaceful revolution, if any such is possible." Henry David Thoreau said that, probably from a jail cell. Why tariffs suck. That's the meme that's up there. And this is just the short version of the 2 hours I spent talking about this. Taxes on Americans. That's what a tariff is. It's a tax on Americans. American companies pay the tax when they're importing non-U.S. goods. Anti-free market. Buyers aren't free to choose the best product for the best price. It's inflationary. The cost of the tax is passed on to consumers. It's regressive, where us, people on the ground, it's $15 billion already. It's one of the stories I'm going to get to here in just a second. It's the first one. Maybe not the first one, but we're going to it. As soon as we scroll back up is what's going to happen. The markets don't like trade barriers. I talked about all of this stuff in depth last week. And trade wars, foreign countries retaliate with more tariffs. And then you have trade barrier on trade barrier on trade barrier. This is what we talked about. That's the short meme version of it that you can grab up there to share with somebody. So there are all of these links up there as well under the Anarchist Audit. There's my guest appearance on the Spooky Scholars podcast, Ashe Woodward. She's coming up at the top of the hour, and we can kind of pick up the conversation, talk about a lot of different things, and as we did on her show as well, cancel culture and Comic Gate, and of course the history of comic books and the relation between horror. A lot of comic books are horror comic books. I might even say a majority, and there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, Marvel and DC owning the phrase, the terms superheroes, and you not being able to use the word superheroes. That's part of it. There are other reasons as well. So the links under there's a number of different ones. I made sure to just get some in there. One of those, we'll do it. Let's see. So the trade war has only just begun, and already Americans have been robbed of more than $15 billion and climbing as the Trump tariffs deliver record high revenue. And I just think it's funny that they use that language. I wrote it there, but they also use the language. If you look, 15 billion and climbing, Trump's tariffs deliver record high revenue. And that's funny because tariffs are not revenue. That's not how they're theft. I mean, that's all that they really truly are. Tariffs being theft, set that aside. Let's talk about the word revenue for just a quick second. Revenue is something that a business receives when it's created. The wealth literally is sort of created through the sale of their goods and services. The revenue is what they get back afterward. It's after all of the investments, and there's a ridiculous amount of trade that goes on to do something like what the president has talked about, which is this idea that somehow we're going to fund all, we don't have to pay taxes anymore, and it's all going to be funded through tariffs. But I've already explained to you how there are ways to get around that, and how that's going to be problematic going forward, and that at best what we're talking about here is just sort of bully politics. And they're even talking about a renewed 25% tariff on steel, and a universal 10% Trump tariff. It's getting crazy, and they talk about the word revenue as if that's something that is happening here. That is, if there's some actual effort, some work, some skill, some labor, something being put to use by another person, as opposed to just authority exercising its ability to manipulate markets and force people to pay their way. They're the welfare whores. They're the lazy sons of bitches. They are the problem with America. Yeah, there's a lot of problems with weirdos and weird ideas and weird ideologies, but as long as those things don't become a part of the political system, as long as they don't become something that we're forced to do, like everything within the political sphere, we are ultimately forced to do if we don't agree with it, and they want us to do it. If we don't do it, they will eventually kill us. If it's not in that sphere of things, then you're talking about something different. You're not talking about the honest efforts of somebody working to make a product and voluntarily selling it. We're talking about force, coercion, and we're talking about gangsters, criminals, scumbags forcing us to pay their way because they can't manage the money that they already steal from us directly through our income. And this idea that they'll replace the income, it would have to be like 78%, 80%, 90% tariffs, depending on what you're talking about, what industry you're talking about, and about what the difference in and how much we buy versus how much we sell. That sort of there's a number of factors that play into it, but ultimately you're talking about paying 78% more. Whatever the baseline is doesn't matter. It's the 78% more that is the real issue, to be able to even get anywhere near what is produced in terms of the wealth through those purchases and sales and every good and service or whatever that happens to pass through the tariffs and the money that's being filtered off of those tariffs. Those tariffs would have to be at 78% to make up the difference from what that is versus what's stolen out of our incomes, what's imported, exported out under tariffs, and versus what is stolen from us on a daily basis for the income. So it's very unrealistic. And isn't it just a 78% shift? Isn't that what's happening? And it's a direct, sort of invasive tax that doesn't affect people that have more money. It's not a big deal for the people that have more money to pay more in taxes, and it's not as big a deal. so it affects us, the normal people down here on the ground, the poorest people. And here's one of the things about the tax system, the way that it works, with the taxes coming in from people who don't necessarily pay taxes. And them getting tax money back by earned income credits and number of children and things like that. Something like this reshifts the balance to individuals and what they purchase, but it's not voluntary. It's still forced on us. Yeah, it's a great thing to shift the balance of cost of things to the people who want to buy them. That's fantastic. But that's not what's really happening here. We're still the ones paying for it. They're pretending like it's not happening over there. They're not taking our money from us so directly anymore. It's just another indirect form of theft. It's still just theft. They're still increasing the size of the government. I don't know what still you need to hear to realize, especially you conservative Republicans, Christians, that Donald Trump is not your friend. He is not anything but a socialist. He is, again, these things that he would be doing if he were doing them and he had a Democrat in front of his name, a D in front of his name, y'all would be losing your damn minds. And that's the facts. I wanted to look at one of these articles maybe just a little bit more closely because it's one that I didn't actually read because it popped up. I hadn't seen it yet. It was really close to when I was basically wrapping up preparing for today. I told you I was prepared today. It's gone pretty well so far. Knock on wood. Of course it goes well. Come on, how hard is it to turn on the microphone and complain about the world for a few minutes? Some people seem to pull it off a lot more than I do, and a lot more, or a lot less intelligently, and with the sense of fairness about them when they do talk about these things. How the Trump administration is quietly repurposing your data for surveillance. This link is up there, towardanarchy.com. Episode 2515 is where we're looking at, and this is from Alternet. And it's a story by The Conversation. It's somebody that calls themselves a conversation, or is it a group of people who have a conversation, and that's how they develop the story? At any rate, a whistleblower at the National Labor Relations Board reported an unusual spike in the potentially sensitive data flowing out of the agency's network in early March 2025 when staffers from the Department of Government, officially DOGE, were granted access to the agency's databases. On April 7th, the Department of Homeland Security gained access to the Internal Revenue Service tax data. Yeah, this was what we always, the people like myself, the reasonable, smart people like myself, have always told you about this slippery slope stuff. Where if you're over here complaining that you don't want to let corporations take your data or have your data, but you're letting the government take it, and then you're letting the government, who's in bed with the corporations, that is owned by the corporations for all intents and purposes, and that it only takes just a shift in policy then to expose your data, as opposed to people that you can't hold accountable. You cannot hold government accountable. Just because you can show up at the polls and vote for some jackass every 4 years or every 2 years, one of the local jackasses that calls themselves a politician, just because you can vote for them doesn't mean that you actually control them or that you can hold them responsible for the actions. First of all, it's not just that one guy that you voted for. It's all the bureaucracy underneath them and around them and through them and with them that comes with the very nature of this beast. You can't defeat it. You can't beat it. So this idea that you can let it get away with a little bit here or a little bit there is a failed notion. It's that slippery slope that people like myself have talked about for many, many years, long before I ever came along. Again, by those smarter, more handsome people. Let's see. These seemingly unrelated events are examples of recent developments in the transformation of the structure and purpose of federal government data repositories. Of course, this is exactly what would happen. People like me have been telling you this would happen forever, that eventually, no matter what excuse that they claimed that they were taking your information for, eventually it would be used against you. And that's what this conversation here is about, because they're talking about how it's being used for surveillance, apparently. I'm a researcher who's not me. This is this person. What did he call himself? What did he call himself? The conversation. Okay. Let's see. I'm a researcher who studies the intersection of migration, data governance, and digital technologies. I'm tracking how data that people provide to the U.S. government agencies for public services such as tax filing, healthcare enrollment, unemployment assistance, and education support is increasingly being redirected towards surveillance and law enforcement. Of course it is. They're going to take it because they have to rob us. Don't you get it? That's what they're doing. They're robbing us every single goddamn day, and they're finding less and less legal ways to be able to do it, and so they're building up their army to do it for them, and they're finding every excuse, every reason to violate every known moral, legal position protecting the individual from the system. Originally collected to facilitate health care, go figure, eligibility for services and the administration of public services. The information is now shared across the government agencies and with private companies, reshaping the infrastructure of public services into a mechanism of control. Once confined to separate bureaucracies, now data flows freely through a network of interagency agreements, outsourcing contracts, commercial partnerships built up in recent decades, and solidified through the use of Doge. In case you aren't paying attention, I added that last. These data sharing arrangements often take place outside of public scrutiny, often, every single time, driven by national security justice. What did I just say? They justify it. National security justification. There's some links in here that you might want to follow up on in this particular story. Fraud prevention initiatives and digital modernization efforts. The result is that the structure of government is quietly transforming into an integrated surveillance apparatus capable of monitoring, predicting, and flagging behavior at an unprecedented scale. They already were doing this. They have been doing this. They've been doing. The Simpsons told you they were doing this in 2008, and everybody laughed and made a joke of it. And then what's his face, Snowden, came along and said exactly what the Simpsons had said years before, and all of a sudden people are paying attention. If the Simpsons knew, people like myself knew, people like this guy knew, there are all sorts of people all around that have been telling you about this for decades, that this was going to happen, that it would be a panopticon of surveillance, and they're just that much closer to it. And they suckered you people in on the right with this Doge thing to cross that barrier. That's what I see out of this now. That's my analysis after watching this for the past few months and seeing exactly what they're doing. It's funny. I hadn't read this article, but these are all the thoughts that I've had about how this has come together over the last few months. And with Doge crossing that barrier, this invisible barrier, this intangible barrier that supposedly exists between the government and the private sector, the business sector, and it's all coming apart at the seams at this point. There's much more. There's a lot more article there. It's well researched, apparently, given all the links that are in it. They're talking about the AI and what its purpose is in there, digital profiling, the cameras that have been around forever. It's all in there. Nicole M. Bennett, PhD candidate in geography and assistant director at the Center for Refugee Studies. What did they say? With every form submitted, interaction logged, and device used, a digital profile deepens, often out of sight. The infrastructure for pervasive surveillance is in place. What remains uncertain is how far it will be allowed to go. Well, we know how far it will be allowed to go. It will go all the way, and people will be rolled up. It's happening right now. They're saying that it's foreigners. They're saying it's this people, this criminal, that person. Well, that's all they have to do. Don't you get that? It doesn't doesn't matter whether you have proof. It doesn't matter whether you have right. It doesn't matter whether you were born American. All that matters is if they decide that they want you to do something, you're damn well going to do it, or they're going to send you out to a gulag somewhere. That's where we're at. Do we really have to pretend like we don't know how far this is going to go, that we don't know where this ends up if it doesn't stop? The best that we can hope for is that he's ineffective for the next 3 years, and that he's voted out of office, and that the next psychopath on the left gets in there and tries to undo it all, and then manipulate government back in his direction, and instead of moving forward and changing government, we just keep doing just like they do with the tariffs, stacking problem on top of problem, never getting to the base problems, never solving them, never providing real solutions for people. We got to get out of here and get Ashe in here, because I want to talk to Ashe Woodward, and you want to hear this conversation. She's coming in next right here on Toward Anarchy. Stick around.
There used to be a phrase for this. It was called monetizing the debt. It means that the Treasury Department has deficit spending, so they put out all these bonds that they're selling, and if the public won't buy them, the Federal Reserve will buy them, because the Federal Reserve can legally print its own money. So it's no problem for the Federal Reserve to buy them. It's just that's what that amounts to is, one, inflation, and two, it amounts to a hidden tax, which will not be confined to the rich, as they call it. I mean, in other words, if you've got X thousands of dollars in your bank account, and the Federal Reserve starts printing more money, it is simply stealing the value of the money that you put aside. Mm-hmm. So that's the same thing as a tax, only it's an inflation tax.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. The air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman, because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. My life has value.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
And here we go, off into hour number 2, towardanarchy.com to follow along as always. And when you get there, it is episode 2515. You'll notice that Ashe Woodward is my guest. She is the host of the Spooky Scholar. I can never say that right. What is it with me and spooky? The Spooky Scholars podcast at spooky.scholars on Instagram. Thank you so much for coming and joining me. You had me on your show here a couple of weeks ago, and we had such a great conversation, and I didn't want it to end, so I thought I'd have you on, and we'd just pick up the conversation, chat about, well, one thing is I didn't get a chance to really chat about you and find out about you. I wanted to know more about the podcast and about you and how you got into it, how you're into horror, because isn't horror like girls in horror? Aren't they supposed to be like clinging to a guy's arm and doing this when the scenes come up? And
how dare you? Oh man, not even. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really fun to talk again. And you're right, there is so much more we have to talk about. But no, horror is absolutely for us girls. I think there are so many quotes out there that say horror really is, a woman's genre. Like, it's all about, we're attracted to that darker side of life, and we like the weird stuff. So that's why we're here.
No, that's good. I think it's a little bit true. I think we all are. I think when we stop to just let the mind sit and be quiet for a little bit, that your own mind can be real scary. And so I think that the distraction that horror can offer us from the real true horrors of reality is a real thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I was just thinking too when you were saying women in horror and the phenomena lately of women who love true crime. That's not necessarily my thing, but it's like a new white woman thing where we just love true crime. We want to know what the actual horrors. My thing is more that supernatural and like the weird fantasy side of it. But yeah, I can understand it can be both. It can be a look into horror, but it can also be an escape for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and to look into the individual's mind,
Oh yeah.
and a walk through a place and a space where some people are afraid to even admit that their brain is capable of going, and not and I'm leery of people who don't embrace their dark side, who don't
Oh,
realize
same.
that they can be a bad person, a violent person, a mean person, and realize it that, oh, I don't want to be that person. I realize I could be this thing. That's kind of scary. I think I'm going to stay over here.
Yeah, I mean, if they thought about it that way and then tried to avoid it, I would absolutely be leery.
Yeah,
I
right.
think I think people though that there are still people that don't realize that horror offers that horror offers a way to experience those things and test yourself and also experience some catharsis and just the spectrum of all the emotions that maybe you haven't you don't know what you don't know kind of thing. So there's, if they've looked at it and then they're like, "Oh no, I don't like what's inside of me and I don't want to look at it." That's one thing, but there's still a lot of people out there that haven't taken an opportunity to see what horror is more than just like slashers that they've heard about or like cheesy B horror, and they go, "Oh, that's not for me." There's just so much more horror than that.
Well, yeah, right. What you get is I guess it's changed a little bit. I think it has changed a little bit
Oh yeah.
because I grew up with the Jason and the Freddy, and they have their place in their space, and they're fine over there, but they're not all the be it, be everything
Be
for
all end
horror.
all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's so much more. Like you said, there's so many more types of horror and types of ways to scare people. I grew up reading Stephen King, and
Mhm.
that's not slashers. That's generally psychological, or that's
Yeah.
if there might be a slasher standing in the corner, but we never actually, the person thinks there's a slasher. That's the kind of scary that Stephen King does, and so I think I appreciate that a little bit more growing up reading those. But I also at the same time was sneaking and watching the slashers, the Jasons and the Freddys, and so they're great. I think they all have their space.
Mhm.
What's your favorite kind?
Oh gosh, that's such a hard
I know it's a
question, but
tough
yeah,
question. Yeah.
it is. It really depends on my mood, but really, I think the criteria comes down to anything that's going to make me think of something I haven't thought of before, right? Like
Yeah.
really push that boundary, make me see something weird and something that I haven't thought of before. I think the maybe my favorite is something that I really have respect for people who can take something, some sort of like strange concept, but make me believe it. Like make me so immersed in it that I can believe that the story is real and that I actually have like something invested in it, but it's just so out there. It's completely unreal. But if they have the talent for bringing me in with it on that ride, that's something I can really get behind.
Yeah,
Like
don't take
Bizarro.
me out of it either. It really
Yeah.
kills me if you
Yeah.
drag me out of it, and it takes a really good creator to not lose that momentum.
Yes, exactly, exactly. In both film and in literature too, right? I
Yeah.
love those like authors that can especially authors that can do that. Like you're just looking at words on a page, but you took me to this weird place. Like that's incredible.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge fan of authors because you can do what I do all the time and sit here and blah 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 blah, and I can just write it off as we're just chatting. We're not really making any ideas, putting anything valuable forth. You take it for
Oh,
what it
that's
is.
so true.
But when you write something, you take the time to put it down. It has to be correct. It has to work. It has to go from A to B, and you can't just skip to C. You got to come back and you got to explain how you got there, uh,
Mhm,
and and you have to do it well. And so I have a
mhm,
lot of respect for authors.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, so I've written now 3 books in the horror world, and, like you were saying, you have to go back and make things check, and more than once. You have to go
Right.
back and watch your tracks, and I think especially because the horror community, as much as we have a lot of cheesy horror out there, the horror community is really smart, and they are looking for that experience, and so you do
Yeah.
gotta watch your steps, and because they're gonna take you to task on things.
Oh, it's another one of those things like, metal music. It doesn't get the respect that it
Yeah.
actually deserves because there's an appearance that it's one thing when underneath it's far more complicated in the case of metal music than most music, and
Mhm.
has roots in much more classical music than
Yes.
even pop or what's considered, popular,
An
and it's the
opera
same with
too.
horror.
An opera. I mean, I
And
love
offering, yeah.
yeah, like, metal.
Get
I
you the
I can don't even come for me with that conversation that metal is basic. What are you talking about? You're not like country music and, country corner,
That's
3 chords.
weird, that's like an old boomer thing, right? Is that well, that's one of those things you can actually point at somebody and go, "You're a boomer. You
But
don't get."
you know what though? Like, I can't say that. I should take that back because I also like punk rock, and, like, punk rock is absolutely, like, 2 or 3 chords. I mean, you can't get mad at that, but, I mean, I guess it's what you do with it, right?
That's it. The more simple the framework is, the
Mm,
deeper you can go with the
yeah.
language, the topic, and that's really the draw of punk music. Nobody's going around saying that punk music is the greatest presentation of our musical skills as a species, but lyrically and as a matter of social consciousness,
Yeah.
yeah, a hell of a lot more than friggin' Britney Spears.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point too. Like maybe that's part of the thing with horror is like a lot of people see, the really simplistic template of a slasher, and they just
Mhm.
go, "Oh, okay, that's just like the same every time." But again, like people that love horror and see what's in it, they go, "Oh, okay, I see the template, but I see what you did with it, and I see how this director or this writer twisted it," and that's the interesting part. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's the magic, right?
yeah,
It's what the good creators can do with it, yeah.
yeah.
Some of them are just amazing. You talk to authors too as well on the
Hmm.
podcast. Tell me a little bit about the podcast, how it started and where people can find it, that sort of thing.
Whew. Well, how it started was really weird. Um,
Right? Yeah, that's I was kinda hoping there was a story, yeah.
I mean, I had a different company before. I've always been, I think, attracted to fear. Like I've always been attracted to the dark side of life, but attracted to fear. And I had a company where I was working with entrepreneurs, and my company was based in, you know what, you're going to die someday. You should build your business now. It was that kind of messaging. And so I had a podcast based on that where I'd have my clients and other entrepreneurs and that like tell me the story about why you're doing this before you die. Why is this so important to you? And then I just started,
Okay.
being able to, do podcasting. I'm like, okay, I want to dig deeper into spookier stuff. Maybe there's something else that I could, some more of this dark stuff that I can work with. Right. So my original podcast was called That's So YOLO because my company was YOLO Palooza. And then the podcast was That's So Morbid. And I talked about like history and I had, just more like true crime kind of thing. And those episodes are still there. I decided to just leave those, but a couple years ago, I decided, I'm not a history major and I don't want to do history research anymore. Originally, I had a co-host and then he left to do some art stuff, and that was cool. But on my own, my background is literature. My background is books and reading essays in the horror genre for fun, like a total nerd. So that's what I wanted to focus on. And so that's when I rebranded everything and Spooky Scholars was born. And so now we talk about not just literature, we talk about mostly film, but analyzing horror films and finding those things, finding those twisty reasons that people do what they do in film and what it's supposed to say to us socially and politically and how we can experience that spectrum of emotions and what we're supposed to get from the things that are being put out there in horror.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Yeah, because you found your thing. I played that game myself over the years, and only just this year have really integrated more of the comic books and things
Ah.
directly into the story. They've listeners and they've all known all along that I own a comic book shop and I collect comic books, but I've never brought that into their world. And I started doing that this year, and I'm much happier doing
Mhm.
that than I
Right?
enjoy doing the rest of the sort of political conversation. This is the second hour of the 2 hours that I do every week. And the first hour is usually just me ranting about rights or something like that don't exist. We pretend exist in our phony ass democracy. Just all of these things, they're fine, but they're not what I do all
Mm.
day. They're just what I come and do for 1 hour every week, just to make sure that I do it for a number of reasons. One, having these conversations and talking about current topics and making sure you know what's going on is just a good thing to be able to talk with people, but also just keeping the old noggin thinking about stuff
Oh,
and
yeah.
not wanting that brain to atrophy. I see so many people who age out and they just kind of sit in a chair at some point and they never get up again and they just kind of stare at the TV. And I think it's a pretty common thing these days. I don't want to be
Yeah.
one of those people. So I'm
No.
not just working on sort of making sure I can still walk as I get older. I'm making sure I can still think as I can get older and have conversations with people. And and I guess I have an advantage because just like horror, just like heavy metal music, comic books, the main thing I read use language that is far more complex than your average language because it has to be. You only have this much space to tell this much story, and so you have to use language that encompasses a lot more of what you're not being able to tell with the rest of the words that you do have.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and that's true. I mean, I should mention, I mean, I was a teacher for 17
Yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah.
So, but I former teacher now. And so the podcast has become my place where I feel like I can still,
Educate.
educate and like flex my education and flex my analytical muscles, because it puts me to task during the week. I'm doing research and I have to put together the script. And so that absolutely keeps my brain going, keeps me, able to talk about the things like and able to analyze because it's strange how people don't realize like critical thinking is a muscle. It's something that you have to work out. It is something that you could lose. And so yeah, it really keeps me going in that way.
Yeah, no, I think the same thing too. But it stands to reason. I don't think most people think critically. So
That's all
yeah,
absolutely true,
it's something we're not
unfortunately.
taught. We're not
Yeah.
taught. We're not taught by our parents. We're not taught by the teachers for
We
sure. They don't know.
try.
Well, obviously. So
We
if you're a former
try.
teacher, you're probably a former teacher because it's kind of a joke, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's not great.
It is not great. That's an understatement. Yeah, I mean, when we are trying to teach those skills of critical thinking and analysis, and we come across all these like stopping blocks of things that we can and can't teach now, things that we're not going to be able to read, and these excuses, even from parents saying, "Why are you making my child read an entire book? They're never going to use this." I was just like, I mean, I can. Like, I love being a teacher, but it is not my job to sell how important education is to you. Like, that is a whole other thing. If I was queen of the world and I could revamp the education system here in the West, I would maybe ask Denmark a few questions. But until that happens, like I can't fight. I can't fight that fight, unfortunately. It makes me feel really crap, like, because I think there's a lot of teachers in my position where we love teaching, we love being with the students, but when we're up against the system, it's just too much to take on.
Well, there's a lot of core problems with teaching, but the main with the public education system, not with the teaching, it complicates the ability to teach people and the
Yeah,
willingness to learn.
yeah.
Is the way it's funded. It's funded through theft, and
Mhm.
it's funded by people who don't have people in the education system who have no
Crazy.
there's a whole long list of why our public education system doesn't work real well in terms of how it's funded, but also that it's compulsory. There are so many people
Yeah, I
there
agree.
that don't want to be there,
Mhm.
from the teachers and administrators to the
Yeah.
students to the parents. I'm sure you
Mhm.
encountered that, and I'm sure you found that the hardest problem is being stuck between the parents and the system, because there's no win. The parents demand too much or too little and are
Yeah.
completely absent from the child's education and completely oblivious and not very educated themselves. Hell, their children are smarter than they are by the second grade in a lot of cases. I'm sure you've experienced all of that.
All of that and more. And just to add more fuel to the fire, this is a new age we're living in. We're living in a world where, we're also up against phones. We're also up against attention deficit. We're also up against AI writing essays. I mean, why are we writing essays if they can just get an essay written for them? That's not the skills they're going to need in the future. But the
Nice.
the people that are behind the scenes, like you're talking about, that are so far behind the technology, haven't caught up to what curriculum I need in my classroom. And when I tell them, well, I'm sorry, we're still on that old curriculum. Well, I'm sorry, but those skills aren't relevant. You've got to get better at this, because it's not my job, again, to rewrite the entire curriculum. I can do my best, covertly, because I know what these kids need. But at the end of the day, I still have to test them on the things that the ministry sees. And so, yeah, it's just the model isn't working, and it's not working for 2025, 100%.
Yeah, well, and then we have these things where they're constantly changing the model.
Right.
They can't figure anything out, nothing's working, the results never go up, the
Yeah.
administration goes up, the teachers stay about the same here, the education level stays about the same here, the
Mhm.
costs are up here with the administrators. None of it's working, so they keep saying, "Oh, well, let's change the way we teach. Let's change the tools that we teach from," and so you're constantly trying to keep up with that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, in a world where you have students that are expectant of a world that moves very quickly, and you're going to school where it seems like it's moving at a snail's pace. I mean, on one hand,
Mm,
that's great for them to learn patience, but I mean, that shouldn't be the place where they should learn, like, inadequacies and people that aren't keeping up
mm.
with the other world, their virtual world that moves so quickly. And then you have, like, oh, my teacher, oh, my school, it just seems so, like, antiquated, and they're just, like, rolling their eyes, and I'm like, "I know, guys." Like, I can only do so much. I'm like, "I get it. Like, I understand what you are expecting here." And when I can't deliver it, I just feel like I'm doing them a disservice. And so, yeah, maybe some people see my way out as, like, cowardly or giving up. I mean, I kind of second guess that on myself sometimes, but it was too much to take on. I mean, if they fix it, I'll be back. I'll be the first one in the line to take on classes. But in the meantime, I'm writing and working on the podcast and just doing something differently.
Well, I think that's a typical story of the best educators, the people best suited to do it are the ones least likely to do it, because they get in there and they're not allowed to do it. They're not
Right.
allowed to teach. They're not allowed to use their actual skills as a person to be able to reach somebody. They're told, Here's your book, teach them what they're told, make sure they can pass this test.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the rest of it." And this is not what I signed on for.
No, no. You have to be able to trust your teachers. I mean, we know what's going on, plus we're on the ground with the students, and I don't know. Teachers are so, like, multi-skilled. Every teacher, it's amazing what we can do. But I mean, that's kind of on them too. It's like, well, you're going to have these people who are good at so many things that they have other options. Like, teachers have so many options. We have so many transferable skills, and then you talk about the mass exodus of teachers. It's like,
Mm.
how can you wonder why? Like, you didn't appreciate the skills that we had. I mean, teachers should be paid $1 million a year for what they do, or give me a freaking assistant. Like, there's just no other profession where I'm expected to do those things. And now I'm, like, looking at, maybe, I don't know if this is relevant, but, like, government talk, like, you know, we don't get any, like, assistance from the government if we quit our jobs, which I did. However, at the end of me teaching, I was not asked to be, I was not teaching where I was educated. So I'm an English teacher.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was told, we have less availability now because because I was teaching a lot of immigrants coming to Canada. And so the visa thing changed and all of this stuff. So I didn't have a full English class, and they wanted me to teach business. And I was like, I'll teach business. I can do that. I had a business, but I am not qualified to teach business. And so when I applied to get employment insurance, they said, well, what happened and all of the stuff. And basically what it came down to was, well, you quit your job. You didn't get laid off. And I'm like, look at any other profession. Let's say I'm a plumber, right? And I work at a company, and then there's a problem somewhere else and they need some welding. Are they going to ask that plumber to take on that welding or lay that plumber off, right? Like, you would not ask anyone else to do a completely different job, except we do that to teachers all the time. I have a friend who was asked to teach coding. Like, she's a kindergarten teacher. Why is she going to be teaching coding? Like, that's the only profession where we get asked to do so many other things. And then they wonder why we leave and do other things, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, they expect you to do everything and don't pay you anything. And when you, as a intelligent person, going and looking at the facts about whatever, just looking through the paper one day, whatever it happens to be, and you come across that chart that shows, oh, look at the investment in dollars in education over the last 50 years. Oh, you mean it went all to administration? Every single dime of it, and teachers' salaries haven't gone up in 50 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's not a lot of hope when you see something like that, because I don't know, you hear what's going on here, and there's talk of ending the Department of Education, but then last week they're chasing down people with student loans, and that's a whole nother scam that was created by the bankers and the government to capture the education system. And so you got all these bankers and the government and these educators in these schools that are getting paid and getting all this money for all these loans that are being generated, and they don't give a damn whether the student is educated, whether they can get a job, whether they needed the education in the first place. It's just get them in here, sign them off on that loan, get them in debt, get them into the education system, and now we got you. And so everybody else is covered, but we get screwed. Yeah. They all took advantage of us in this big system, and now we're the ones. It's just this line item that's left on some banker's book somewhere. All the educators, all the loan originators, everybody got paid at the time that the loans were taken out. The value is in the education. There's all these reasons why this thing is broken, and you can look right at it and go, stop doing this, don't do this anymore. You're trapping people, you're playing a game with their education and their futures and their entire livelihood for the rest of their lives, and then you want to make us pay for it too. And it's interesting to sit back and watch, knowing that it's such a trap and that it just continues to this day. And you see these administrators and government people and bankers just like, no, we got to keep it going. Yeah, everybody has to be educated. Everybody has to go to an Ivy League school. You got Harvard saying now they're going to give out tuition to people, and you can just come to Harvard for free or whatever it is. Really, that doesn't really sound like it's going to make Harvard any better. That probably doesn't sound like those people seeking a free education from Harvard probably aren't the people who need an education from Harvard and can use it the best. Right. It's a joke. The whole thing is a joke.
Well, I mean, we're just seeing a lot of like that cyclical thing come to a head, right? Like, okay, we had the generation before us telling us that this is the way, right? Like, this is, you get educated and then you get a good job, but slowly but surely we're just finding out that is not true and not necessary, again, in this world, in a world where you can get your education for free online, where you can, especially where you can become an expert, on any platform. I mean, the world has changed. And so that old paradigm has shifted and it hasn't caught up, except you have those people still kind of going, oh, hang on, hang on. Can we still get money out of the people that can be duped into this system and still trying? But
Well, that's why you get them in younger. That's why you get them
yeah.
through the public you insist, you demand that they go through the public education system. And so
Mhm.
it's just a funnel. It's just what
Yeah.
it is. And that's why when they start talking about trying to force people to pay student loans after all this time or something like that, to me it seems like a joke because it is such a fraud. And it
Mhm.
is such an obvious fraud that there's there's all these different conversations in there and around bankers and loans as it is anyway. Money's made out of thin air. The value of an instrument is not the numbers that are on it, it's my signature, and they take my signature from me. The bank takes that signature from me, and they take that power from me, and they turn it into wealth for themselves that they use to generate other way. They just create it all out of thin air. And so there's this whole disconnect between what is the cost of something for real and what is the cost of something after these people have come in and manipulated everything. Well, we know that the cost of education is almost free. You shouldn't have to pay for it, and you shouldn't necessarily have to pay to teach somebody, because what we've done for most of humanity is have apprenticeships, have
Yes.
somebody come in and they just learn directly from somebody. So we know education isn't something that we have to go and pay some group for, and then we have third parties come in and manipulate a little money system and start funneling money to themselves in complete disregard of the education that they're giving, the quality of education,
Mhm.
whether or not the students are really truly learning of anything of value, whether they need to be there in the first place. And it's I don't know how you fix that at this point without doing something like what they've attempted or talked about doing here, and that's just ending that Department of Education, ending that public funding, and just stopping, triage situation, cut it off and start over again.
I mean, in some aspect of that theory, I see it. I mean, yeah, it's cutting some waste, it's cutting some, again, old paradigms that need to be shifted maybe, but when you don't have a plan B to support it, then what about the people that fall through because they were depending on some of those systems that were in place, right? Like that's who's getting the kind
Well,
of
that's the
crap end of
problem,
it.
right? Is you're creating the dependency in the first place. And that's
Oh,
why
that's
they put the
true.
system in place,
Yeah.
is because it creates a dependency. And when when you have the dependency, then they come back to the system. I need more from you. Okay, sure. We'll take it from over here. We'll build it right here. We call it taxes. We call it education. We call it handouts. We call it
We
welfare. We'll
call
call it
it
whatever it is.
childcare also, right?
So,
Like, that's
yeah,
the thing, calling it childcare and, like,
yeah,
replace of other things, but if you
yeah.
start there with supporting families, a lot of this can be supported in other ways. Education can be fostered in other ways.
Yeah, education itself, well, the childcare thing too, and the working thing. This is part of, it's all part of that same system. It's all part of this same system of manipulation and control, because you have a concerted effort by a group of rich white old people, of course, mostly male,
Mhm.
to bring more labor into the market and get more people working and producing more, so that they're making more money, more things are being produced, more customers are being served. There's only X number of bodies because only half of the nation is working. It's just the men. The women are at home, they're raising children. Well, okay, we'll take care of your children, we'll watch your children during the day, we'll take them to school, we'll educate them. You go to work, lady. Don't worry about your kids. We'll take care of your kids and their education. You go to work and produce some more wealth for us. And so we have this whole chain of things the Rockefeller Foundation, these people, you hear these names all the time. They're these rich old families from the last couple hundred years that have manipulated our society into destroying the core family unit and providing the services and things that we would otherwise have provided for ourselves in a lot of ways. The education of our children, the care of our children, and the feeding of our children. These more and more, free lunches and lunch on a Saturday at the school, not just on Friday and Monday through Friday. The whole thing is just a trap to keep people inside that system, so you're entirely dependent on it. And so when you're talking about changing it, if you talk about only changing the surface things, if you never go and completely eliminate the problem, that's the problem with the tariffs. You're up there in Canada, and we're talking about this trade war, and we have tariffs and tariffs. A tariff is a barrier to trade. So what you do is, I'm going to pass another tariff. So that's another barrier to trade, and another barrier to trade, another barrier to trade. And until you get rid of all that and go back and fix the problem that is with if it's a steel industry or whatever it is, why it's not competing, if you never fix that problem, then that problem just compounds. And it's the same with this education system. It's the same with our banking system and our lending system. It's all been manipulated and changed for their benefit. And so it looks like at this point in history that when you do these things, you're playing their game. I'll give you a really good example of something. So people hate capitalism. So I'm an anarchist. I should probably hate capitalism. It's supposedly a left thing, but I don't, because capitalism is obviously my right, your right, anybody's natural right to distribute and gain their wealth in any way that they can. The morality of their individual actions in doing so are not what's in question. It's the natural right to be able to do so. I can't take that right away from you. I can't take that right away from a billionaire or somebody else. Because if we take that right away from the billionaires, then I don't have that right either. And I should have that right. And so the real problem is not capitalism, it's what some capitalists do with their capital.
Yes.
And so there's a disconnect there in just the simple idea of what this thing is supposed to mean to all of us. Capitalism appears to be what rich white guys with power and money do, but it's actually what all of us do every single day in exchanging down on the street voluntarily without consideration of what those guys are doing. So it's a very good example of a manipulation of what something really is in reality and what it appears to be on the surface. And when you get a scratch past that surface, you get all these guys running around here that hate capitalism, except that capitalism isn't corporatism. It isn't what that guy's doing with his money. It's what everybody is doing with their money. And if
No,
you
I'm
say
with
that,
you.
what's that?
I'm with you on that. Like, I'm the same. I've got my punk rock roots, but I don't hate on capitalism. It's just the way that it's done. I mean, I have that debate inside myself. I'm sure you do too. Being a shop owner, you're participating in this system, and I have that question now. Like I said, I've gone back to writing, and so I'm working for a lot of businesses. And same with the podcast. Like, I don't do ads on the podcast, but I will feature people who are listeners. I will feature people who are part of the community that have small businesses, and I will give them a spot. Or, when I'm looking at a customer for my sales copy and working with a business, I research them and I'm like, okay, does this fit my morality? Like, I do question that. I know that puts me at a disadvantage sometimes, because I'm not going to take contracts
Sure.
that somebody else would, because they can put their morals aside, but I just can't do that. But that's how I choose to participate in capitalism. I just think that's been lost for so many people, but it still can work. We've exploited it in the wrong ways. We've gone off track. Maybe that means tearing it
Yeah,
down. I
that's
don't
it.
know.
you're taking the control. You're looking at the controlled example and the manipulation as opposed. You said if you take all of that aside, you take the capitalist appearance and set it aside and realize that we are just doing exchanges, whatever it
Yeah.
is. It doesn't matter whether it's money, it doesn't matter whether it's trading, whatever, I trade comic books all the time,
Mhm.
and that's the essence of free markets. That's the essence of free trade. That's the essence of capitalism. It's not what you see. Disney. We talked about it before a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a misconception about what something is. Hollywood is not Disney. Hollywood is not Ryan Reynolds. Hollywood is not whichever guy girl is now showing that they I don't know, who was it, JoJo Siwa this week. She's no longer lesbian, and now she's like kind of wants to be binary, non-binary, or I
Yeah,
don't
she's
know.
just
To each their own. That's not the point. It's the appearance is that's what's Hollywood. It's all
mm.
these freaks, and it's Diddy, and it's but that's not true. That's not what Hollywood is. Hollywood is a million itty bitty little people like you and me writing scripts and producing the things that they love and putting in hard days
Mhm.
work at day after day after day to provide for ourselves and to produce content and to produce things to entertain and enlighten people. It's not just Disney. It's not just MGM. It's not,
Mhm.
this idea that corporations replace people. This was the biggest thing that I was getting at, is that there's this idea within the business world, from people who hate capitalism, that corporations wouldn't exist anymore. That
Mm.
if you took away capitalism and government controls over capitalism, that corporations would go away. They're basically saying that you and I would never, outside of capitalism, outside of the force and use of government, decide, hey, you know what, we should create a contract together in a business and sell some products and do some things together.
Yeah,
That
okay,
that
that's
would never happen if it wasn't for capitalism and corporate government. That doesn't
no.
even make sense.
No,
And
that
so
doesn't
that's the
make
kind of
sense.
a mentality we're dealing with when we're dealing with the people, with talking with people about larger ideas than just that word capitalism, or just that word education, or just that word horror.
Wait, but
That's a
you're not gonna
long conversation to get back to that. But
I just but with collaboration, right? Like, look at podcasting because we're out here in basically, I think, the Wild West, right? Like, we don't
Mhm.
have right now, thankfully, like controls on us. That's why I love podcasting because it is so much freer, But I don't have. What else did we have to gain besides I don't know, like making an episode and content? But like, you're still reaching out to people. Like, we still have conversations with people to work and collaborate and make some things. Like, no, how would you ever? You're not gonna like tamp down human nature to work with each other. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It just speaks to that idea that we have so many of these other external ideas impressing
Mm,
upon us, that if we want to talk to somebody, that we kind of have to claw through it to get to something that we can find common ground.
mm,
And that's why horror, comic books, having conversations on a podcast, I find to be so important and such great ways to reach people. I think
yeah.
entertainment is the easiest way to reach people,
Mm,
whether it's horror or laughter or action, whatever it is, any chance to, particularly laughter, to get somebody to laugh and put their guard down, and to be open. They're probably no more open. In fact, you see the
oh yeah.
Dogma hat there,
Oh, I didn't miss that. It's one
yeah,
of the greatest
You
movies
know
ever.
Kevin Smith then,
Of course.
and it's the 25th anniversary
Yep.
of Dogma, and he finally got all the rights to it. Harvey Weinstein, all that is out of it,
Yeah.
and yeah, so they're re-releasing it in theaters in June,
Oh, I
and I
didn't know
just
that
went and
part.
saw him on Monday, and I didn't know this, but he has this same thought about laughter. He has the same ideas about laughter that I do, and he was talking about it after the show. And it's funny because I believe that laughter is, so the most pure, most honest response that you can get from somebody, and
Mm,
that's basically what he said. And that same thing about that, you can get somebody to laugh and put their guard down. You have the opportunity to reach them on a real level, and not just that surface level, that breaking through.
mm. Yeah, I mean, that's probably why horror and comedy go together like chocolate chip and peanut butter.
Yeah,
Like,
right. Shaun of the
I mean,
Dead.
oh, yeah, I mean, and there's so many because
So many.
it's just a way, like you said, like to get that reaction out of people, but bring them to something else that's weirder that they hadn't really thought of before, and a combination that they maybe didn't realize goes together. Like what you find funny might have some sort of connection to your morbid curiosities or
Mhm.
to your darker side that you go, oh, why did I find that funny? Am I a horrible person?
Yeah, I remember
Maybe
watching
you are.
Joker, the
Mm.
first Joker movie. The second one was fine. It wasn't as good as the first one, but I just remember commenting that myself about it, that I found myself laughing a lot, and nobody else in the theater was laughing around me. Okay, well, I understand the movie clearly better than the rest of you do. So
But yeah, I think, yeah, laughter can really indicate that, right? Like it shows, I mean, it shows so much of your background, but it's the same thing with horror, with what people like in horror. Like what in your background, if you were traumatized by a certain thing or if something scared you as a kid, you might avoid it, you might lean into it, right? You know, it depends on the person, obviously, but all of those things in your past, I think, lead you to those things that we like or dislike in the first place. But I think horror, because it's attached to so much to the more powerful emotions, I think that a lot of those things come up. And I think that's why people have that nostalgic connection. Like when you mentioned like Freddie and Jason, like people have that nostalgia they go back to from horror because those were like formative years where your emotions were just, coming into being, and then they got like, terrified and traumatized.
you got a little interrupted. I
A little bit.
remember uh, I wasn't afraid.
Mm,
I can remember being sort of a single digit and try flipping through HBO and watching the slasher movies and saying, and not being afraid of them. It
yeah.
was it was the curiosity. Well, what is the big deal? Why is it?
Yeah.
This is just a movie. That's not a real thing. I mean, I even realized this myself at a young age. I never had nightmares about. I mean, of course I've had nightmares in my life, but I didn't. I wasn't traumatized by watching a slasher flick when I was a kid.
No, I mean, neither was I. And there's really only a handful of horror movies that really give me that real creep factor.
Oh, sure.
But it's more that curiosity. It's like, where is this going? Where is this depraved director taking me?
Well, what did
Yeah.
you think of, so this is an interesting point and change in movie making,
Mm.
Blair Witch
Oh, terrified me at the time. It was
at
very
the
scary.
time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was of the age, I think I was probably, like, late teens,
Mm.
and we were inundated with the advertising campaign that this was
Yes.
real, right? We were
Yes.
told this was a real movie. I mean, I remember being in the theater with my best friend and just that slow realization that this was not real, that we had been kinda duped was
Duped.
kind of
Sure.
disappointing,
Yeah.
right? And then I remember also looking around at the people that didn't get the dupe, that they
Mm.
still thought it was real, that marketing had worked really, really well on them, and it was like, "Wow, that's interesting," right? And but see what I mean? Like, that happened in a probably formative time for me, and my antenna went up and went, "That's interesting how different people reacted to this, how different people took this on, other people didn't." Like, that part just fascinated me. Still a great movie, like, and that whole advertising campaign adds to the
The
whole
whole, yeah,
effect.
the complete picture is
Yeah,
what makes it, for
exactly.
sure, yeah.
And that's just, it's fascinating. It was just fascinating what people were drawn into and what people were scared of, and it was still scary, like, for the first few moments when you still thought it was real, but. But yeah,
Well,
the whole
yeah, I
thing.
mean, when you're still trying to buy the trip,
Yeah.
I mean, we all
Yes.
know it's not real.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think I went into it believing that they had actually found some footage that these kids had been lost. I knew it was a movie. Nobody tried to sell it to us as a documentary, so you just had to be paying it,
Oh, they
like,
did
kind
for
of paying attention,
we
and
did.
yeah. But they did. It was that was the thing about it was is that it was at that point in time with the crossover of the internet
Yeah.
and the ability to advertise on the internet and the ability to use the internet to add to the movie, not
Mhm.
just here's your movie, here's something about the movie on the internet, but here's some more of the movie on the internet. Here's
Mhm.
before you even go see the movie, here's like some snippets of the film that like this is raw, but setting up that
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
universe that they did in such a short period of time and such and such a minimal budget and everything that they, it's really amazing what they did
It was,
in
but it
terms of
was
what it means for the industry in the future of producing things like that. But um,
well,
the quality of the movie itself,
mm,
it's just some
but
guy standing in the corner at the end. What the hell?
yeah. That's when it was disappointing because you realize, okay, this is not exactly what we were in for. But I think it was also the time period, it was ripe for something like that. Like you said,
Hmm.
things were
No,
changing
absolutely.
technologically, and the fact
Well,
that they
we've just
had
been through the
video
MTV
cameras.
era and the whole
Yeah.
Big Brother and all those things were just at the just had just made their impact, and it was obvious that that was where the world was going in terms of that type of entertainment.
Well, right, because I mean the most original thing that had happened in horror up to that point was Scream, and I didn't
Yes,
like Scream at the time because it was
of
just full of
course.
a bunch of like characters from TV shows like Party of Five and Friends. I'm like,
Mhm.
get out of here. This isn't horror. Give me those people that I've never seen before and show me them dead. But that was totally different. But then Blair Witch, yeah, was taking that technology, and you're right, it was kind of like foreshadowing how like reality, and now it's a huge part of the genre is found footage, how realism was going to be a big thing. It was going to change what we saw from the kind of like over the top puppetry of horror and giving us something a little bit more real. So it was a pivotal film. It was really important for what it did at the time.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so, yeah. And it's neat to be able to have been a part of something like that because
Yeah.
we don't necessarily always get to be a part of a big change in an
Yeah,
industry
that's
like that.
true.
Yeah.
That's true. That's a good way to think of it.
Yeah. No, I've been able to witness a few things like that in my lifetime and have been a part of it. It's just technology in general in my lifetime. I'm Gen X and uh we existed before the computers and during the computers and maybe
Mhm.
after the computers depending on how the world goes, but
I hope so. I wanna
yeah,
see
right.
that.
Maybe we'll see. It'd be I don't know what a Gen X computer would look like, but I'm sure it would have holes in its jeans and need a haircut.
And drink from the hose.
I
Hold on, I
I
can't hear
where
you.
does it all
Wait, wait,
go?
wait.
What do you have a
Why
bigger
can't I hear
picture?
you?
Are you just happy to have your conversations and you don't really care if it does anything other than you just getting to chat with folks? Are we lost audio? Oh no. It doesn't appear to be me. No,
Oh,
I'm
hello?
working.
Oh, hello? I can hear you now,
I
hold
hear you
on.
again.
But I oh,
That was weird.
There we go.
Yeah, you keep dropping out.
There we go. I think I got
Weird.
it. I'm just
Got it.
checking those.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
I have no idea what the hell I was saying.
Huh.
Oh yeah, no, I was asking. So where's it go?
Mm.
Are you happy to just have conversations every week and do your thing, or do you have a bigger picture? Do you want to make it something bigger?
Whew. Well, the plan is okay. So why is it? Oh, sorry, it's saying my microphone is noisy. Why is my microphone noisy? What do you mean? Okay, I'll try not to be noisy, whatever that means.
No, it
Um,
sounds fine. Yeah.
okay. The plan is, I mean, you were saying watching all of these changes happen, the internet's a big part of that, AI is a big part of that. I mean, right now, we're very grateful to have podcasting. It's the Wild West out here. We're able to do what we want. We have freedom of speech still for the time being, really holding on to that. I don't know if all of that's going to last. Our like social media platforms are seemingly in trouble. They're not as popular as they once were, and that's where I've made a lot of contacts. That's where I've made most of my fan base. So right now it's more about encouraging people to yes, check out the podcast, get involved with the topics. Like we meet in person, well, not in person, but face to face online every month and talk about the topics together. We have a book club, the horror book club, spook
Oh,
club,
cool.
and, we're talking about horror books, we're talking about banned books, reading banned books together, and just having community, I think, is going to be the future. And so that's what I'm trying to foster through the podcast is like, yeah, we're talking about horror and all of these things, but there's a bigger conversation and we should be a little bit closer and banded together for the future, I think, so that we can always find each other, right? Like have each other's contact and be a real club and actually form this community. Because it could all go away, I
It's
wanna
an
make sure that we can find
interesting
new people.
point. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that's a very interesting point because it is kind of fragile right now. The
Mhm.
whole us even being able to access the internet at all. They'd
Well,
like to take that away from
look
us.
at Spain. I mean, that was something that happened that was predicted last year, what's just happened in Spain. They
Yeah.
predicted that we were gonna lose the internet this year, and a lot of people were saying like, "Oh, that would be great." And like, yeah, it kind of might be great to experience
Yeah,
for a
no.
bit, but a lot goes away, a lot of connection goes away, and, I don't think that's gonna be a one-off situation. I think we're gonna see those things happen in the future, and I don't wanna lose contact with the people that I've met. I wanna have other ways to get in touch. I wanna have other ways to find community and support. So, I'm also really working on building more of what I'm doing in my local community, like
That's yeah, there you go.
I'm getting a lot more awareness of, people go, "Oh, you're an author in this city?" I'm like, "Yeah, you have a horror author, you have a horror podcaster in your town." We're only like 85,000 people, but I'm here. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
you
that's
know,
great because I get that same thing here in Topeka, and
it's so
we're
important.
250,000 people or
Yep.
something like that, and people are like, "What do you mean we have a New York Times best-selling author? What do you mean we have more than one? What are you
Right?
talking about?"
Right? Exactly. And I mean that and so I mean that's the whole point of this too, right? It is about I mean, sure, being on the internet is great and reaching out to people across the world is one thing, but it is also about real community because that
Oh, my
is
store.
it's going to be so much more important, I think, coming up. I think we're going to really have to band together as cheesy as that is, but it's I think that's where things are going. So that's where my head is constantly looking.
No, that's good. I think that's what everybody should be doing anyway.
True.
This
Absolutely.
larger society, this global society, or even just American society is all a lie. It's really all a bit of a joke. This idea that we have a common experience, we really don't.
Yeah.
We have a very surface level common experience when it comes to our individual experiences and our family lives and our friends. We have very different lives and it's only these simple commonalities around us that keep us surface connected. We have to want to connect with each other on the rest of the
Yeah.
levels, on the important levels.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it takes effort. It does, especially because like we were talking at the top of the show is like the atrophying. A lot of us have had our social skills atrophy. A lot of us have had our, contacting strangers and being in those situations or community building
If they ever
muscles
had them.
if they ever had them to
That's
begin
one of the
with.
things about the whole people talking about how, oh, Facebook is bad, social media is bad, YouTube's bad, TikTok's bad. No, they're tools. What's bad is
Yeah.
the people who are using them and your impression of them. Learn to
Mhm.
use the tools better, and you will function perfectly fine in those spaces. And if you control yourself and your responses to the input that comes across, that is negative and garbage and much of what is actually on social media, then you too will find your way through it. And I don't like it when people blame the tools when it's the
Same.
people.
Absolutely, same. Like, and again, especially I think that's part of what people need to maybe just literally learn, right? Like learn the difference that like AI is a tool. Sure, can it do your job for you? Absolutely. It could take us all over tomorrow. But there's still a lot of room for all of us to be using it like a tool to make our lives easier, to be creative with it, to take it to the next level, to do good rather than harm. So there's just so many more opportunities to see that, you know, those things are tools and they are to be used by us still very creative human beings.
Yeah, it's a conversation I'm having every day. Obviously, in the comic book industry, it's a big
Oh, I'm
thing.
sure. Yeah.
Because it's all sides of it. Yeah, there are people. Yeah, absolutely, it's a tool. Yeah, it's a tool that some of these people are using that they're using dishonestly, and that's another topic within the topic. But can we get past the idea first that it's just a tool and that some people use tools poorly? And once if we could ever get past that, we'd get past this notion of things like capitalism being bad or something. And getting past this idea of labels. Labels are great. I know people say, oh, I don't want to label. I don't want to label myself. I'm going to do this. Labels are awesome because I don't go around drinking things that I don't know what the hell is inside of it. The label that's on it tells me what I need to know before I ever open it. And it's the same with people too. Choose your labels a little better. Pick them yourself, maybe. Put them out there for yourself. Don't let other people label you. We got to go. We're already out of time. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, Ashe. I really appreciate chatting with you again.
Anytime. You know, I'll come back and chat horror or all of the